The house felt different after my father passed away. Not empty exactly, but quieter than it had ever been before. My father had always been a quiet man. Even when he was alive, the house was never very loud. He preferred calm mornings, slow afternoons, and evenings spent reading near the window. But now, the silence felt heavier. It was the kind of silence that reminds you someone is missing. A few weeks after the funeral, I returned to the house to begin sorting through his things. It was something I had been avoiding, not because the work was difficult, but because every object in the house seemed to carry a memory. His coat still hung near the door. His favorite mug was still sitting in the kitchen cabinet, and the small radio he used to listen to every morning was still resting on the wooden table beside his chair. I moved slowly from room to room, opening drawers, folding old clothes, looking through books he'd carefully kept for years. Each item told a small story, but there was one thing I kept thinking about: my father's camera. For as long as I could remember, my father always carried a camera with him, not a modern one, not a digital one like people use today. His was an old film camera with a worn leather strap. He took it everywhere: family dinners, walks in the park, road trips during summer vacations. Whenever something caught his attention, he would quietly lift the camera and take a picture. Click, just one simple sound. Then he would lower the camera again and continue walking, as if nothing special had happened. When I was younger, I used to ask him about the photos. Why do you take so many pictures?" I once asked. He smiled a little and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "Pictures remember things people forget." That was all he said. My father rarely explained things more than once. But now, standing alone in his house, that sentence kept returning to my mind. Pictures remember things people forget. I continued searching through the living room cabinets: old letters, a few photo albums, receipts from years ago. But I still hadn't found the camera. For a moment, I wondered if it had been lost, or perhaps packed away somewhere I hadn't looked yet. Then I remembered something. My father had a small wooden box in his bedroom closet. He rarely opened it when I was around. And somehow, I had never asked what was inside. I walked slowly down the hallway. The door to his bedroom was still half open. The room looked almost exactly the same as it had when he was alive. The bed neatly made, the curtains slightly open, letting soft afternoon light fall across the floor. I stepped inside and opened the closet, and there it was. The small wooden box sat quietly on the shelf. Dust had settled lightly across the lid, as if time itself had been waiting there. I lifted the box carefully and placed it on the bed. For a moment, I simply looked at it. Something about opening it felt strangely important, almost like I was about to discover something my father had never said out loud. Finally, I slowly lifted the lid. Inside the box was the camera. The leather strap was worn and soft from years of use, but the camera itself still looked strong, almost proud. I'd like it had many stories to tell. Next to it were several small rolls of film. Some of them had already been developed, others were still sealed. I gently picked up one envelope filled with photographs. I had no idea what I was about to see. Just ordinary family pictures, I assumed. But when I pulled the first photograph out of the envelope, I immediately realized something surprising. These weren't the photos I expected. In fact, they were pictures I had never seen before. For a moment, I simply stared at the photograph in my hand. It wasn't a family photo. Not a birthday, not a holiday, not even a picture of our house. It was a photo of a small train station. The building looked old, almost forgotten by time. A single wooden bench sat near the platform, and a rusty sign hung above the entrance. There were no people in the picture, just quiet space and soft afternoon light. I turned the photograph over. My father had written a date on the back, April 14th, 1987. I frowned slightly. That was many years before I was born. Curious now, I pulled another photograph from the envelope. This one showed a narrow street in what looked like a small town. The road was empty. A few bicycles leaned against a brick wall. Laundry hung from a balcony above. Again, the photo felt peaceful, almost poetic, but strangely unfamiliar. I turned that photo over as well. Another date, June 3rd, 1987. I began laying the pictures out across the bed one by one. Each photograph showed a different place: a quiet cafe with two empty chairs, a long road disappearing into the countryside, a small bridge crossing a river. And there were almost no people in the photos, just places, moments, pieces of a world I had never seen before. And every photo had a small date written on the back, all from the same year, 1987. Something about that year was clearly important to my father, but he had never mentioned it to me. Growing up, my father rarely talked about his past. Whenever I asked questions about his younger years, he would usually smile gently and change the subject. "Those were different times," he would say, and then he would start talking about something else. At the time, I never pushed further. I assumed his past was simply ordinary. But these photographs suggested something else. They felt like pieces of a story. I picked up another photo. This one was different from the others. For the first time, there was a person in the picture. A young man stood near a riverbank, holding the same camera that now rested in my hands. He looked about 20 years old. His hair was darker. His posture was confident, almost adventurous. But the moment I looked closer, I felt a quiet shock. The young man in the photograph was my father. I had never seen him like that before. Growing up, my father had always seemed calm, careful, almost reserved. But in this photograph, he looked different. Younger, of course, but also freer, like someone standing at the beginning of an unknown journey. I turned the photo over slowly. On the back, my father had written just two words: "First day." That was all. No explanation, no details, just those two simple words. First day. First day of what? I felt a strange sense of curiosity growing inside me now. These photos were no longer just random memories. They were clues. Quiet clues left behind by a man who had never spoken much about his life. I looked back at the envelope. There were still many photographs left inside. And suddenly, I realized something. My father may not have told his stories with words, but perhaps he had told them with pictures. I held the photograph of my father for a long moment. It felt strange seeing him like that, young, confident, standing beside a quiet river with the camera hanging from his shoulder. Growing up, I had only known the older version of him, the calm man who drank tea in the morning, the quiet man who fixed small things around the house, the father who rarely spoke about the past. But this young man in the photograph looked like someone at the beginning of an adventure. I placed the photo carefully on the bed and reached for the next one. This picture showed the same small town from earlier, but now there were people. A market street filled with stalls, fruits arranged neatly in wooden baskets, old bicycles leaning against the walls, and there, near the corner of the photo, stood my father again. This time, he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at someone else, a young woman. She was standing beside a small flower stand, holding a bouquet of white lilies. Her hair moved slightly in the wind, and she seemed to be laughing about something. The photo captured a moment that felt natural, unplanned, like my father had taken the picture quickly before the moment disappeared. I turned the photo over slowly. There was writing again. This time, my father had written 3 words: met her today. I felt a quiet surprise. My father had never told me about meeting someone like this. He had never mentioned a small town, or a flower market, or a woman holding lilies. I continued looking through the photographs. In the next picture, the same young woman was walking beside my father along a river path. Neither of them looked directly at the camera, but the way they stood close together told its own story. Another photograph showed them sitting at a cafe table, 2 cups of coffee, sunlight falling across the table between them. In one photo, she was pointing towards something outside the frame. In another, my father was laughing. I had never seen that expression on his face before. Was not quite like this, not so open, not so carefree. Each photograph felt like a quiet chapter of a story my father had never spoken about. I realize now that these pictures weren't random. They were moments carefully saved, moments from a time in his life I knew nothing about. As I looked through more photos, I noticed something else. The dates continued moving forward: April, May, June, July. The two of them appeared together again and again, walking through narrow streets, sitting beside the river, watching a sunset from a small hill outside town. It felt like watching a memory unfold slowly through photographs. But then I reached the last picture in the envelope. And this one felt different immediately. The photograph showed the same train station I had seen in the very first photo. But this time, it wasn't empty. My father stood near the platform. The young woman stood a few steps away, and between them was a distance that hadn't appeared in the earlier photos. Neither of them were smiling. The train behind them had its doors open, and even without words, the moment in the picture felt clear. Someone was leaving. My hands felt strangely still as I turned the photo over. On the back, my father had written a single sentence: "Some stories only live in photographs." I read the sentence again. Some stories only live in photographs. For a long moment, I sat quietly on the edge of the bed. The photo of the train station rested in my hands. The moment captured in the picture felt heavy with meaning. My father standing near the platform, the young woman standing a few steps away, and the train waiting behind them. It didn't take many words to understand what the photo was showing: a goodbye. But what I didn't understand was why. Why had she left? Why had my father never mentioned her? And why had he kept these photographs hidden for so many years? I looked back into the wooden box. There were still a few envelopes left, and at the bottom, a small folded piece of paper. Carefully, I lifted it out. The paper had aged slightly, its edges soft and worn. It looked like it had been opened many times before. I unfolded it slowly. Inside was a short letter written in my father's handwriting. His writing was simple and neat, just like the man himself. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear. It began with the name, Anna. My eyes moved slowly across the page. I don't know if you will ever see this letter, but I wanted to write down what I never said at the station. That day when the train arrived, I realized something too late. I realized that some moments in life pass quickly, and if we don't speak, they become memories instead of choices. I paused for a moment before continuing. Meeting you changed something in me. Before that year, I believed life was simple: work, routine, responsibility. But those months with you showed me another world, a world where people follow their dreams instead of their fears. I could almost imagine my father sitting somewhere quietly while writing these words, perhaps late at night, perhaps with the same camera sitting beside him. The letter continued. When you left, I wanted to ask you to stay, but I didn't. I thought there would always be another chance, another train, another moment. I felt a quiet sadness as I read the next line. But sometimes life moves forward before we are ready, and the people who change us the most become part of the past. The letter ended with just one final sentence. Thank you for teaching me how to see the world differently. That was all. No date, no signature, just those words. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. For years, I had believed my father was simply a quiet man who preferred ordinary days. But now I realize something deeper. My father had once lived a chapter of life filled with adventure, love, and difficult choices. A chapter he never spoke about, but one he never forgot. And through these photographs, he had quietly kept the story alive. I closed the wooden box slowly. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Before that afternoon, I had always believed I knew my father well. He was the calm man who fixed things around the house, the man who drank tea every morning, the man who rarely spoke about the past. But now I understood something important. Even the people closest to us carry stories we may never fully know. My father had once been a young man standing in a small town far away, a man who walked along rivers, visited cafés, and met someone who changed the way he saw the world. Those photographs were not just pictures. They were pieces of a life he had quietly lived. I picked up the old camera again. The leather strap felt soft from years of use. For a moment, I imagined my father holding it the same way, looking carefully at the world, waiting for the right moment, then pressing the button. Click. He had never been a man of many words, but maybe that was never his way of telling stories. Maybe for him, photographs were enough. I walked to the window and looked outside. The late afternoon light was soft, just like the light in many of the photos I had seen. And suddenly, I understood something he had once told me when I was young, a sentence I had almost forgotten. Pictures remember things people forget. At the time, I thought he meant simple memories, family moments, trips, ordinary days. But now I realized he meant something deeper. Pictures remember emotions, moments we didn't speak about, stories that quietly shaped who we became. My father may never have told me about that year of his life, about the girl named Anna, or about the goodbye at the train station. But through those photographs, he had still left the story behind. And maybe that was enough, because sometimes love, sometimes regret, and sometimes the most meaningful moments in life don't need many words to exist. They simply live quietly in the memories we leave behind. If this story made you think about someone in your life, a parent, a memory, or a moment you once shared, take a moment to reflect on it. And if you enjoy calm storytelling like this while improving your English listening, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more gentle English stories. Because sometimes the quietest stories stay with us the longest.